Okay, so hello everyone, and let's start today's OAM community meeting. I think we will have a very quick meeting today because we don't have a lot of agenda to share. So the first update is that we are still working on the OAM spec release, which is very close to release, I think this week, because all the entities specification has been finished. Thank you for every contribution from the folks in the community. And the rest of the task is that we will clean up the narrative, the introduction, as well as the practices documentations. We will try to reference the latest examples and samples in those part of the documentation, as well as ensure that the introduction parts do not include so many definitions of the persona stuff. So we will try to focus the whole specification on the entities of the OAM spec. So this is the rest of the tasks that we're trying to fix this week. So if you have any update or any opinions on the existing specification entities, please feel free to raise issues, but this should be done in this week if we still feel there's something we want to fix. So this is first update. The second update, maybe I think most of the folks will be interested, is that we recently shipped a feature. It's of course in the implementation side, but this has been asked for quite a while. That is the revisions for definitions. And I will share my screen to show this feature a bit. Yes, so we add a POC documentation in this website. So the basic idea is that I think a lot of folks mentioned this before. For example, today we have a worker definition, for example, component definition. And maybe a few days later, and we want to update this definition. So right now, you have two ways. You either need to update the schematic part in this definition, and then the whole system will actually have to use the latest version. That means there will be inconsistency here. For example, some of your applications want to focus on or want to stick to the previous version, and you basically don't have the way to do that because you only have the latest version of component definition in that case. And another example is that a lot of people that treating component definition as immutable, and that is actually what we defined in the original release of the OAM spec. I mean, in the 010 release, we mentioned that component schematic is actually immutable. So if you want to update the schematic, for example, you want to say, okay, I want to add a new field to, I want to expose a new field for the workloads, for the containerized workloads. You have to create another component schematic with a new version like V1 and V2. You have to do that because they are immutable. This is actually a way we provided if your application wants to stick to a specific revision. For example, your application will stick to the previous revision. You don't want to use the latest version of this component. It's totally okay. But that actually created another layer of burden to users because you have to manage multiple versions of the component schematic in this approach, which was abandoned soon. So in this release, we actually, in the implementation side, we actually added this feature. So in that case, as you see in this example, if you already have a component definition installed in your cluster, for example, it has such schematic, then you can actually update it easily by applying a new definition with the same name. So in this case, it's named the worker. So if you apply a new definition with the same name worker, but you update the schematic, for example, you add a new field or you change the schematic of the component definition, it's totally okay. As long as you do this, the system will automatically generate a group of revisions for you In that case, you will have a worker v1, worker v2 in your system. They are so-called the definition reversion object is basically a snapshot of every version of the component definition. So since we have supported this in the application, now you are free to use this approach. For example, you can say, I want to reference the worker component at v1 to deploy my application. So this is already supported in the latest release of the Kubevela. And of course, you can say, okay, worker at v2 is totally acceptable, but by default, if you do not specify any, you do not declare any revision here, the system will always use the latest revision, which is in this case is v2. So in that case, the system will deploy the component based on the schematic and that version to instantiate your application. So this feature has already been implemented in the latest release of Kubevela. So if you are interested in this feature, please take a look at this documentation to see if it meets your requirement or there anything is still improved. A similar approach also applies to shape. Okay, go ahead.
Some of the naming is a little confusing. Like when you do the kubectl get definition revision, you say the name is worker-v1.
Yes.
And then when you use it, it's worker at v1.
This is the revision object. This is not the component. This is not the component definition.
That's the definition. Okay.
Yeah, the component definition is just the worker. It's always the worker because you updated the definition, right? So the definition object is mutable. You always update that in place, but the system will generate a revision object to snapshot every change. That's why you can still use the same name, but add a revision tag here to reference actually the different schematic.
Okay, I'll read it more thoroughly. Offline.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Right, so definition is still worker. That's why you still use worker. You just add a revision because every schematic change will trigger a new revision, which snapshot the schematic information at that revision. That is the whole design. This part is not a specification, but we definitely want to mention this in the 0.3.0 release. For example, there are two things. First thing is that definition is mutable in the new release, and the system will be responsible for generating or snapshotting the changes of the definition. And then in application, you can have this way to reference different revisions of schematic. So this will be, I think this will be added to the spec. But how to implement it is of course is the implementation side concern. Any other question regarding this feature? Okay, cool. So this is a very straightforward implementation side feature, and which have a little impact in the specification, since right now we will claim all definitions are mutable, and the system will be responsible to handle the revision part. Okay, besides this, we do not have a specific update on the existing spec. We will try to release it this week. But we do have some minor update on the next release planning, as we actually we discussed this topic in previous meeting. For example, what issues we want to fix in next releases of OAM spec. I mean the major releases, not the small releases, not patch. So it's more like features planning for next major releases of OAM spec. And Hongchao is recently working on this part. So I will let Hongchao to express some high-level ideas. He actually recently is thinking to see if you have any other inputs regarding to that. So Hongchao, maybe you can talk a little bit what's right now in your mind.
Yeah, sure. So recently, designing a new, do a little modification to the model that we add something called workflow and policy to the spec. Like basically, a policy is just like currently, we have per component configurations, but we don't have like cross component, like global application level, like this kind of configurations. The policy is designed for that. And the second big change is about the workflow. Like currently, if we can just like apply those components and policies, all those resources to just apply directly to the cluster. The main problem of that is, like there are many more use cases other than this kind of simple apply logic. Like people want to do blue-green rollout between like two regions, more to help more split the traffic. And they have like even doing like such thing, they have so many different kinds of implementations. Like they can use ASTO or they can use other service mesh infrastructure. So we want to make this thing pluggable. So we define a general workflow and people can plug in their own implementation. And we also like disable the default, like apply behavior so that like they can plug in their own control logic. That all of this are done in the workflow. Yeah, but like mainly that's the for two things from high level. First is we have like the application level policy, and second is like we have the workflow so that you can customize the control logic to like do more complicated like blue-green rollout and traffic like management and multi-class management, etc. Yeah. So I think
Summarize is that we're thinking about introducing new concept. The first is application level policy. It's actually more like the next. I think it's more like next generation of the application scope. The scope will be the subset of policies. For example, networking scopes will be kind of like networking policy in that case, but policies do is able to include more policies. For example, security also a policy in that case, and application level insights like monitoring or other application observability strategies will also be application policies in that case. So that part will be more like next generation of scope in my mind. Yeah, we can discuss whether we want to keep the scopes in that case. Maybe you can keep two, it's fine to me, but the implementation will be similar. We will have definitions to do that, just like what we have scope definition today. This is the first concept. The second concept Hong Chang mentioned is workflow, but it's not a pipeline. It's more like a rollout, but the rollout happens actually across multiple revisions of the application. For example, today we have application rollout in Kubernetes. As I mentioned before, it is now an independent CRD because the current OAM model does not have a perfect match with that. So it works at application level because the rollout or a promotion, for example, blue-green promotion happens across multiple revisions of the application. So it's more like application level. And in the meantime, the workflow, again, like promotion or rollout, it actually will be responsible for rendering or deploy application. So in that case, it's kind of different from chase, which is a part of the application. So this process, for example, promotion, rollout, or traffic split, they are working across multiple applications. It's not part of a specific revision of the application. So for that part of things, they are basically I will say it's basically independent logic to control the application. For example, to do traffic shifting or to roll out the application from revision A to revision B. So that part of capabilities Hong Chang is mentioning, we want to give it a new entity, which name is the workflow. So you can define rollout, the traffic shifting, the promotion. In that part, again, for the implementation, it still will leverage the definition concept to make that happen. And the only difference is that we will have a place for us to declare, okay, this is a policy, application level policy, this is application level workflow to ensure the whole model can actually capture your full description of the deployment. So this is basically the two two new model entities we're thinking about. So in that case, the user just deploy application. Application will claim component, traits, policies, and workflow, and then it will go to the target cluster. For another example is multi-cluster case. For example, placement rule is actually a typical example of policies. So you claim, okay, I want to have this placement role. For example, this application will go to cluster A, and several other instances of this application will go to cluster B. And this kind of policy can all be declared in the policy section of the application entity. This is the next big changes we are thinking about in the releases of model, more like to make the whole picture complete. Anyone has ideas or comments on these high-level designs? We're still at very early stage, so no, we're not working on the proposal yet. So just want to express high-level ideas to see if anyone also have similar user cases or similar problems want to solve, or do you think this is a reasonable direction we want to go?
We have all those problems, so that's good. And the term workflow seems a little weird to me, but right at the same time, it seems like the use cases are more constrained to just multiple revisions. They all have to do with multiple revisions. Yeah. So we might need to think about that a little more, but maybe it's a revision workflow or something. I don't know.
Yeah, the terminology is indeed difficult. So we are trying to use the word pipeline. It's totally different thing. But workflow is more like, you basically define a workflow to do something, right? to do traffic shifting, to do rollout by reversion. That's why we are using this terminology. But again, this is open for discussion. But I think you already get what it's really about.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So in that case, me and Hongchao will trying to working on some concrete examples and proposals. We'll share out to the community to discuss if the direction sounds reasonable. Again, the goal is to ensure that our application model can capture a full deployment of your application. So you don't need to leak a lot of things here and there, and we want to make sure the model can capture all of them with different sections, traits, components, policies, workflow, and then you deploy the application entity. So the rest of things will be handled by your implementation. And we want to make sure the model is extensible. So every workflow, every policy, again, they are defined by definition. So you can implement your own operator controller to do that. You can use Argo, you can use Flagger, you can use Flux to do to enforce the policy or the deployment strategy. It's totally open. And in implementation side, we'll try to pick some solutions and best practices, but again, they're just more like I would say best practices. They are pluggable and they can be replaced at any time, just like the component traits that we have today. That is direction we try to go. I'm happy to see if that can solve some existing problems that you guys are facing. Okay, this is the update from the currently working items. So next actions, we will try to finish the existing OAM specification, and in the meantime start to draft some discussion designs on the new features we're talking about. Not sure if anyone has other topics want to bring up.
Whatever happened with the OAM samples were going to be reviewed? Did anybody do anything on that side? I know
yes,
I didn't,
yes.
But
if you take a look at the existing repo, there are a lot of PRs happening just right now to update these samples. I think most of them has already been merged. There are still some small portion need to be updated. So most of them has already been updated to latest version. If you take a look at only that repo.
cool, thank you.
Yeah, I will send out the sample repo instead of anyone do not know about that. Yeah, so most of the samples has already been updated very recently, maybe just last week. And there are some small portions still is working in progress. If you check the existing issues and pull request, you can see the current process. But I think all of the samples will be updated, will be finished updated this week. It should be very. I think it should be very close. And again, another thing maybe you guys are interested in is that we do add a Terraform sample in this repo. So in that case, you can actually use OAM model to provision Terraform cloud resources, which is very straightforward and easy to use. If you have any ideas or any feedback on that, we're happy to discuss and collaborate. Yeah, I just sent out to the Terraform demo in the chat, so you can take a look on that. And we are also adding a very complicated microservice demo. It's still most of them has been finished, but there are still some portion need some fix. It's actually the microservice sample from Google, which including a lot of things like Istio as part of that. So we're trying to use this as a real world demo for OAM and Kubevela. We also fixed all the existing samples, like the flight tracker, like bike sharing. They are more like some easy samples for people to get started. So yeah, the sample repo is under fixing and very close to be finished this week. We hope that when we have the OAM release, of course, we will have the corresponding samples. That is the goal. Okay, any other feedback, input, anything we want to discuss? Daniel, do you have any update on your side or any questions?
No, from my side. We have been pretty busy working internally in the product these past 2 weeks, so nothing to share at this point.
Oh, no problem.
We'll share the news when we have them. We are working on improving a little bit the project and the overall stack. So yeah, we are deep in there.
Understand. Okay, so in that case, I think we can actually finish this meeting now, and it's a short meeting, but we do have a lot of progress, and it will be really appreciated if you can take a look at on the for example, sample repo and the Kubevela documentation to see if it's alive with your your vision of the OAM spec, as well as the latest OAM spec releases. We're trying to make sure that everything is consistent. Okay, this is today's meeting, and really appreciated you folks to join the community, and looking forward to see you folks in next meeting. And the next meeting, I believe we will be able to release the OAM spec as well as the samples and the implementation documentations. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.